Quiero presentarles a una gran comunicadora que me va a acompañar en la conducción de este evento. Además es empresaria y una gran mujer, Altair Arabo.
¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo están? Quiero decirles que es un enorme placer para mí estar aquí en este foro tan vanguardista. Es un placer conducir contigo, mi estimado Dr. Roch.
Muchísimas gracias.
Bueno, Women True North World Forum 2015 es el primero en su tipo que tiene como objetivo facilitar los espacios para la creación de redes de negocios y colaboraciones internacionales, promoviendo una mayor equidad entre mujeres y hombres en 5 temáticas: innovación y tecnología, desarrollo humano y conciencia social, desarrollo de talento y creatividad, empoderamiento y emprendimiento y educación y cultura.
Hoy les agradecemos por su presencia a todos ustedes, CEOs, directores generales, gerentes generales, empresarios, emprendedores, tomadores de decisiones, hombres y mujeres que creen en la equidad y en el trabajo colaborativo. Invariablemente trae para todos mejores resultados.
Para dar inicio, les solicitamos apagar su celular o ponerlo en modo vibrador o silencio. Les informamos que únicamente se tiene permitido salir del recinto a término de cada presentación.
Durante el evento, queremos que vivan una experiencia de carácter interactivo, en donde ustedes sean también protagonistas, y para ello, el programa de conferencias se desarrollará mediante una aplicación llamada Slido. En esta plataforma podrán ustedes interactuar durante las conferencias mediante sus dispositivos móviles o celulares, por medio del cual
podrán hacer preguntas a nuestros conferencistas en cualquier momento durante la presentación, darle like a sus preguntas favoritas para que tengan mayor posibilidad de ser contestadas, participar en encuestas, mandar sus tweets con el hashtag Woman2015, ver la agenda completa del evento, calificar las actividades e interactuar con los demás asistentes.
estar conectados a internet y dar clic en el icono Women True North para accesar su perfil Slido. A partir de este momento comenzarán a interactuar y todas sus comunicaciones se verán expuestas en pantalla.
El staff de Slido, ubicado al fondo del salón, podrá asistirlos en cualquier momento sobre el sistema. También contamos con estaciones de carga al fondo del salón para que conecten sus dispositivos en caso de que lo requieran.
Queremos dar también un aviso. La siguiente ponencia es un panel y será en el idioma inglés. Si alguien necesita audífonos, podrá, después de presentar al coordinador Juan Rodrigo Moreno, pasar por sus audífonos para tener traducción simultánea. Sin más preámbulo, cedo la palabra a Juan Rodrigo Moreno, socio y director general de Moreno, una reconocida firma de abogados corporativos de la región del Bajío, con más de 70 años de trayectoria, especializada en inversión extranjera, sector automotriz, fusiones y adquisiciones. Es para nosotros un honor tenerlo aquí presente y les invito a que lo reciban con un fuerte aplauso.
Gracias. Muy buenos días, un gusto enorme estar aquí con tantos amigos. Quiero invitar a nuestros invitados a que pasen de una vez al escenario. Haremos la conducción de esta conferencia en inglés porque así nos lo solicitaron. De verdad es increíble el nivel de personas que traemos el día de hoy a esta conferencia. Entonces quiero invitar a que pase la doctora Shama Bhatia, Rebeca, Henrik y Bob, por favor, si me hace favor de acompañarme al foro.
What do you want us?
Jump onto the side too.
Yeah, so we divide men and female. That's probably a great idea. Really?
We are not doing that.
I don't think we should, right?
No division. It's a great honor, everybody, to have you here today.
No husband and wife couple, not.
Please, no husband and wife. And I must start by saying and telling the audience that we have here amongst us some of the top world's professionals in their fields of expertise. But most of all, I've seen your resumes, I've studied your background, and you are amazing human beings. Thank you very much for being here. And I'll start by making a very brief introduction of each one of you. I'll start with Dr. Shama Bhatia. Shama is a unique blend of Eastern and Western cultures. Her journey began in a small town in India and has since spanned the world. Shama has lived and worked in 3 continents, traveled to more than 30 countries, and speaks 8 languages. She is deeply spiritual, versatile, and open-minded. Shama has a doctorate in international finance from the Haas School of Business at the University of California in Berkeley. Shama is a quintessential blend of yin and yang. She's a serial entrepreneur, an educationist, a trainer, a coach, and also a pranic healer. She has trained more than 10,000 women in leadership worldwide. She's married and has raised 3 children who are all successful professionals. She really feels privileged to be born a woman. She's adventurous and free-spirited. Shama will not be anyone's half-time, downtime, spare time, or sometime. You're either fully there or not at all. Thank you, Shama, for being here.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you.
Big Bob, as he is known. He's a sportsman. He's a tall guy. He's practical. Bob is one of the world's leading experts on personal achievement. After finishing high school as a star multi-sport athlete in Canada, Big Bob continued his successful athletic career at university, quickly becoming a standout in both the wrestling and the football teams. Still in university and with a clear vision for accomplishment, Bob began to focus on his next 2 goals: to win an Olympic medal in wrestling and to make the Canadian Football League and win a coveted Grey Cup, and he's the only man in the world to have ever achieved both of these goals. Today, Bob puts his wealth of experience into valuable personal coaching and team building, and he energizes and excites audiences as a motivational speaker and author worldwide. Thank you, Bob, for being here.
Thank you.
Rebecca Wang. She was born in Korea and raised in Argentina. Rebecca was educated in the United States, receiving both her undergraduate and graduate degrees from the MIT in chemical and environmental engineering. She has quite a unique PhD on social network theory at the Stanford University. Rebecca was recently listed by Forbes as one of their 20 inspiring young female founders to follow on Twitter, and recognized by the World Economic Forum as a recipient of the Young Global Leaders Award. She's a co-founder and CEO of the San Francisco-based startup Unoodle. Her company's main focus is on helping companies and governments engage with communities and entrepreneurs and innovators. Unoodle has worked with governments, multinational companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and Intel. Rebecca also serves on the global board of Kaufman Foundation's Global Entrepreneurship Week, which gathers 10 million entrepreneurs every November in all over in around 100 countries. Thank you, Rebecca, for being here. And finally, Henrik, well, he's just the husband of Rebecca. Henrik is Danish. He's a great guy. He's a technician. He's a serial entrepreneur now living in San Francisco, where he focuses on entrepreneurship education, impact investing, as well as startup projects in the digital signage space. As an engineering student, Henrik founded 2 companies in IT recycling and design thinking. In 2010, he moved to Silicon Valley, where he founded Startup Experience, Inc., a company that delivers interactive workshops aimed at solving social problems through entrepreneurship. Henrik lives in San Francisco, but he spends most of his time traveling around the world to train entrepreneurs and educators and inspire young people to become more entrepreneurial. He even recently taught a class at Stanford University on how to design products for women. Thank you very much, Shamrik, for being here also.
Pleasure.
Give me the lead.
So, well, we should talk about entrepreneurship, of course, about female empowerment, but this won't be the only subject. We should also talk about collaboration. So let's get down to our subject. Let's start by asking Kshama, we need you to shake the audience. Let's talk about any type of barriers that female normally encounter in the workforce. Why are women more and more dropping off strategic business positions? Why do they encounter these barriers? Which is a fact. Let's face the facts. Probably worldwide, women are not still occupying 50% of the most top executive positions in boards or either the government or the corporate world in general. What are the barriers? What are your thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Juan. Since we are all talking about empowerment and all of that, and change and inclusion and all these wonderful things that we talk about in terms of women integration, we're talking about change, fundamental change. So I'd like you to, all of you, once get up, please. All of you get up for me. And the best way I find to change yourself is to first start shaking. Shake, shake, all of you, come on, let's shake. Shake, 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 shake. Shake. Remove all your beliefs about women. Believe about all your beliefs about progression.
Necesito unas gotitas de ti.
About what it means to be little, to be black, brown, or blue, to be tall or short.
Mis ganas de ser culpable en robar tu amor.
Raise your hands and be your God's gift. Thank you, Mexico. I love you all. And we love you, right? So let's look forward to a great conference. Phew. At my age, you catch your breath. Okay, it's wonderful. Wonderful to be here. And let's talk. And let's share. So let this not be just the people talking. If you guys have anything to add, please feel free. Okay? All right. So, Juan, when it comes to integration, we need to look at the whole subject from a dual perspective, in my opinion. One is from the side of competencies, okay, building competencies and having the right competency to work. And the second thing is to have the right amount of cultural and structural support for people to work, right? So let's talk a little bit about what it means to build competencies. To do that, first let's define work, okay? What is the fundamental social unit of society? I mean, what is the first thing that comes to play in a society? It's the family, right? It's the family. And who nurtures the family? The woman does, right? Primarily. So if we have problems about a woman being a woman, what kind of society are we talking about? What kind of world are we talking about? Right? Nobody empowers you, ladies. Nobody empowers you, men. You empower yourself. The power is in your soul. The power is in your belief in yourself because we are all created equal, right? But as a mother, as a primary nurturer of your family, if you can raise a man to believe in himself, if you can raise a man that respects your womanhood, that respects the importance that you carry as a person, as a woman, you won't have to fight for integration. You won't have to compete. You'll collaborate. And this is my fundamental premise, my fundamental belief about life in general. And I don't believe that we need to talk in a society like Mexico about how important it is to have a woman tending to a family, because that's an important thing. And work, what describes work? Is housework not work? It is work. It's just not economically compensated, okay? But in a sense, if you see the well-being of a society, okay, economic compensation is not the only criteria in this world for happiness, right? There are societies and nations that have worked only towards economic needs and over material needs, and we see the problems in those societies. They're visible for us, okay? And then there are societies that are poor, and yet there is happiness, there is joy, there is love, there is so much good happening there. So everything is not about economics, folks. Everything is not about economics. Everything is about happiness. Everything is about fundamentally living together in joy and in love and in the spirit of what we were created to be, right? So I'm going to let some of the others share their ideas, but these are my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Shama. Bob, you're an expert in goal setting. What do you think? How can we break these barriers? How can we create collaboration?
I'm going to give her a hug right off the bat, first of all. Two hugs.
I'll take it.
Oh! I'll give you 20 minutes to stop
Right.
that.
Always take a hug.
I have a real simplistic view on it, and I get excited about it. Oh, I'm already hugging. And if everybody could take one thing away from this weekend, Mike's not working.
Is it working? Le pasas
If everybody could take one thing away, in my estimation, and sit down, and I do one-on-one goal setting. It doesn't matter where I am in the world. It doesn't matter what country I'm in. And you talk, and we were sitting in the back, and one thing we connected right off the bat, we talked about being happy. And then we started talking about energy. And if there's one thing I'd leave a message with all the people here, most people have their priorities out of whack. And when I say that, I mean it in a simple way, that I think the best investment you could possibly make is in you. And most people are always in a nurturing, I'll take care of them. They don't even know how to say no. And we always think that energy in an Eastern philosophy always comes from other people. It actually comes from you. So you think about, as simplest form, we talked about children, you talked about family. If you get up in the morning, and I always am a believer of take care of yourself first. So take care of your body, mind, and your spirit. But who do you have to take care of first? Yourself. So change your priorities around where other people are always taking care of the family first. Your family is not your number one priority. It's you. And most people have their priorities out of whack. And think about it in the simplest way is that if your child is someone that's had a children. I had 3 children. You had 3 also,
Three.
right? And laying down on the floor, if you're going to do an exercise, you do a push-up, you do a sit-up, what's your child do? They sit right beside you and they mimic you, right? And it's the best thing you can be is be a leader in your own world, is doing that kind of stuff, is doing the right thing. Eating properly, exercising, taking care of your mind, and most people don't do that. They're always taking care of other people. And if I could leave one simple message away, that if we could get people to take care of themselves first, it not only creates leadership, and people start watching you and mimicking you down the road. And to me, it's that simple message that I'd like to see people take away is take care of yourself first. You're the most important person there because you can influence a lot more people. Thank you very much.
A ver si nos prestan otro micrófono para esta parte de acá. And I'll turn to Rebecca. Rebecca, we've heard your resume. You're a true expert. Tell us, since from a female perspective, have you encountered barriers in enrolling into the workforce?
Silicon Valley, do you hear me? Yes. Coming from Silicon Valley, oftentimes people talk about Silicon Valley as an example of an ecosystem for the world to copy or emulate. I have to tell you, when it comes to women, Silicon Valley is doing a very poor job. We have, in terms of percentages, 96% of the entire investor community in Silicon Valley on Sunny Road are men, so only 4% women. Only 10 to 20% of all founders of startups are female. And if you look at also the anecdotes of people who are going through pitching and starting companies and the types of experiences that they encounter on a daily basis, I sometimes feel like I'm back in 1950, where I'm watching an episode of Mad Men. For example, there have been cases of people going to provide a pitch in front of investors, and all women, founders, and investors, you may have 20 or 30 male investors in a boardroom. They'll listen to the pitch, they'll agree with a lot of the ideas, and then at the end of the meeting, they would say, next time, bring a man, because it will make you more credible. There have been times when people questioned my marital status, if I'm not married, why I'm not married, if I'm gonna have a child, do you think you can still be a CEO or lead a company while having a family? And these are questions that I got from board members and people today. So definitely, there are a lot of social biases that we still encounter in Silicon Valley, and this is really puzzling to me, because when you look at the market, $2 trillion annually are controlled by women around the globe. This means that as a market, women represent more than India and China combined as market opportunities. We in the US control 70% of all purchasing decisions. A lot of people tell me in Mexico it's 95%. But if that's the case, why is that we don't have more participation and perspectives from women in the technology space of Silicon Valley? We are actually worse than public companies, where normally the ratio of women in public boards is around 50% or higher. In Silicon Valley, typically that's 5% or even 0 in many companies. So when it comes to how to overcome these barriers, my belief is that it starts with a few social dynamics, right? So first of all, I do believe that women today are not always helpful to each other, especially in the space of technology and engineering. I have encountered people who I think have the perception that this is like a musical chairs game, where there's only a limited number of seats, and when the music ends, you better have a seat. Because if you're not sitting down, you're going to be standing for the rest of the game, or you're out, right? So a lot of women that are successful may feel like they have to be protective of their position and not help the next generation. Fortunately, this is changing. I think I have seen many positive signs of this changing. But first of all, I think we have to think of women like a fraternity, like being part of an HBS alum club. Like, it's really an affinity club where we have to help each other. Number two, mentorship is really important, and when looking for mentors as a woman with a career and family, sometimes we only focus on other women, and that's limiting because there are not that many women in powerful positions out there with time to help all of these new women who want to advance their careers. So I think the participation of men, which is one of the themes of this conference, is crucial to create the betterment and advancement of female empowerment in all fields. And then finally, I do believe that it's about role models and community building. We don't have the celebration of the right and balanced role models in technology. In Silicon Valley, a lot of times we look at women who are almost impossible to be true. They have babies, and 2 weeks later they're working and signing contracts and working at the office. We have a woman who in 8 years never take vacations, or they don't spend time with their families. And all of those ideas or concepts as cultural symbols are really hurtful to women who do want to have balance and equilibrium in their family lives. So I think we have to have better role models that are more realistic and also relatable to women in the new generation.
Thank you very much, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Henrik, you know yourself around Silicon Valley. You're an expert in entrepreneurship education and training and collaboration. Share your thoughts with us, please.
Yeah, so the microphone is working? Fantastic. Well, so first of all, thank you all for coming here, and thanks for the invitation. Organizers have done a great job putting together this conference on this extremely important topic. So I always like to start with the why, and why we're here is because we still have a huge problem around the globe around inequality around genders, right? Gender inequality is still a big problem. It tends to be underplayed, especially among a lot of older male investors that tend to not really see the importance of dealing with this issue. But we still have a situation today. Of course, it varies a lot from country to country, right? We see women that got the right to vote in New Zealand back in 1893, but then we have countries like Saudi Arabia, where only 4 years ago, in 2011, women were allowed to vote in Saudi Arabia, right? Where King Abdullah basically accepted that maybe it should be a good idea that half the population should also have a chance to have their voices heard. I come from a small country in Northern Europe called Denmark. Some of you might have heard of it. And it tends to be one of the pioneers in terms of gender inequality, of reducing the inequality at many different levels, in terms of education, in terms of influence in the political system, in terms of gender equality in the workplace, by putting together a lot of different policies that we won't have time to dive into. But the Scandinavian countries led by Iceland, Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark have been kind of fairly quick at realizing the importance of having all these brilliant women also participating in the financial sector, in the political system, and so on and so forth. But why is importance? Of course, just from a sympathetic standpoint, of course, half the population should have equal rights and equal influence in the country. But coming from this as a businessman and as an entrepreneur, it's not just out of sympathy that I see the need for women to be part of the process. I have seen with my own startups and with all the thousands of young entrepreneurs that I work with, that we need women to be part of these teams because it dramatically increases the quality of the ideas and the quality of the teams. And now Silicon Valley is finally slowly starting to realize that you actually see much better performance when you have a female founder as part of the founding team, right? So it's not just some kind of hippie illusion that, oh, wow, we should really take care of these women because it's so bad for them. No, it's from a societal perspective, the biggest contributor to growth over the last century has been not by advancement of technology or by new processes in business. It's been that women have started contributing and being enabled to take part in the business world and have joined the workforce. That has been the biggest reason why we have grown as a society around the world. So it's, of course, tremendously important that we focus on this issue, and it's not just because it's bad for the women, it's because for society, for businesses, you will grow better, you will be more successful if you have a female founders. We see Intel Capital that are now announcing a fund where they only want to invest in female founders. It's not because they just want to donate to charity, right? It's because they see that female founders are brilliant and they're oftentimes better at understanding the end user and designing products that people actually care about. We've seen a slow increase in number of startups that have women as part of the founding team. In 2009, it was 9.4% or 9.5% of all startups in Silicon Valley that had at least one member who was a female on the founding team. In 2014, 5 years later, we have seen a double of that. So we're around 18% now of the startups in Silicon Valley that have at least one female founding member. And that is because people are realizing the importance of this. And I see this when working with young entrepreneurs and young startups, that many of the women or the startups will just do so much better. It's actually a fundamental requirement for many of the startups that I work with, when I work with a student team, that they need to have at least one woman in the team, because otherwise they're completely disabled, right? Because the dynamic changes, and you will just see so much better ideas come out of the process. So in terms of the barriers, in terms of some of the challenges, of course, not having been a woman, at least maybe not in this life, it can sometimes be hard to realize, well, what are some of the barriers? And I think men tend to neglect the fact that we do have all these generalizations and tend to overrun women in many ways, which leads to sometimes a lack of confidence. Because it's certainly not a lack of quality and lack of skills. We see women outperforming men all the time in the educational system, so it's not because they don't possess the skills, but there is a challenge around confidence. So one of the things we work with a lot is building that entrepreneurial confidence and enabling anyone to believe that you can have brilliant ideas and you can do with your life whatever you want. But especially it seems like some of the girls have to overcome that stigma and some of those challenges around believing that they can actually go out and build a successful business on equal foot to any men in the audience. So, yeah.
Bravo. Gracias, Henrik. Well, Henrik just mentioned quite a controversial issue, which is quotas. Shama, what do you think about quotas? Do women really need quotas? Are they underestimating their own capabilities? What are your thoughts?
Well, two things. One is, first of all, the readiness of the woman herself to be out in the world and doing things. Now, quotas, in my opinion, are required to the extent where if you look at how many women enter the school system and how many men enter, we are almost at equal ratio. Everyone goes to school as men and women together. And most people in today's world also start working together, men and women. But then, as you go forward and you see the progression of advanced strategic positions, more and more women fall out. So in the mid-career segment, you start seeing a fallout of the woman. And why does that happen? Because there is the woman has marriage, maternity, and motherhood as 3 punctuation marks in her career. So what happens is that while a man surges forward in his career uninterrupted, the woman stops and starts several times. And this punctuation makes her fall back, first of all, from the mainstream. So when she wants to get back in, she either is lacking competencies or the skills to simply be there, and then people are afraid to move on. So in terms of, we can't do much about this, but we certainly have to equalize this ratio so that this can move on. And how could we do it? Different countries have different ways of doing this, and Europe has handled this very well in certain nations, where they say, okay, you give the woman a 1-year maternity break, and then you move on, and she mainstreams again, she keeps her job and all of that. In certain nations which are more capitalist, that is not a possibility. But so there are different areas, and each country has to find its own solution because there are also cultural issues. But I think fundamentally, the woman herself has to keep herself competent throughout this phase. So don't stop building yourself through these phases. Go to school, learn English. English is important. I was discussing with a group of women yesterday that 80% of the world is cut off from you if you don't speak English. Okay, because it is an important language, and it is the language in which generally the communication is taking place in this world. Learn English, speak English, empower yourself. Go to school, finish a degree while you're waiting for your children to grow up. Okay, so you're not falling from mainstream. You could learn technology. Go learn something in technology. Keep yourself up to date. Don't fall back on that while you're sitting at home. Don't watch soap operas while your children are growing up. Do this for yourself, right? Take care, like Bob mentioned, of your health, right? Make sure that your body is kept fit, because maternity takes a lot out of your body, right? So keep your body fit. Make sure that you have the energy to come back, right? And with all of this, travel is another big thing I think is important, because travel makes you understand the world, it makes you grow as a person. It makes you understand the world and where it's going, right? And keeps you in the mainstream. So these are all different tools that you could use to keep yourself competent even while you're at home. And there is nothing wrong with being at home. Enjoy your motherhood, enjoy children, raise them with love and care so that you're fulfilled when you go back to work. You're not guilty. You're not feeling bad, because this is a big part of being a woman. So, and in societies where this is happening, you end up being a big contributor when you're a powerful woman. I'm a woman, and all of you are women, and we are all standing here, and we have children. We've done it all. But men have to recognize that women are doing two jobs, right, when they're at work. So we need men to integrate right from the point when they're young children, to start teaching them to co-participate in this process of family raising, because that role has to be shared as well, so that not just the woman is doing all the work. This would be my take on it.
Good. Thank you very much. Anybody wants to jump in?
Yeah.
You're jumping all over this one, aren't you?
I'd just love to add to that, Sharma, because I totally agree, and also to your point that it's an additional job that you also learn from. So of course, women can do additional things like taking online courses, online education, world-class education is free online now, so that's definitely a possibility. But one of the interesting things so I'm not trying to portray Denmark as being this amazing country overall. We are the happiest people in the world. Well, some people say. I'm not so sure. I come to Mexico and everybody's smiling here, so I think they got something wrong with that survey. But there's still a gap of around 15% in terms of payment of salary. There's a gender gap there in Denmark, so they haven't succeeded in doing this perfectly. But there is 12 months of maternity leave. And when women get back after having taken care of their children, they often actually get a raise, because many of the employers and society as a whole recognizes that it's not just taking care of a baby and sitting and watching soap operas. You also gain new skills as a mom. So you oftentimes get back to the job after your maternity leave. You can choose to take up to 12 months, you don't have to. But then you come back and you actually get a raise because they recognize that you gain new skills and new knowledge during that period as well. So I feel like that's something that a lot of men probably need to.
That resonated?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just a show of hands, how many people believe that the best investment is in themselves? And if you're not doing that on a daily basis, you're doing a disservice to yourself, correct?
Absolutely.
You and I have met for how many minutes and we hit it off like in the back room, like we didn't stop hugging. Then next thing she's teaching me how to dance. But it's so true, and you say it in a constant, is just always investing in yourself. And that's where I see, we just hit it right off. And I said, and the eventual thing that's amazing to me, I get to go do this worldwide, and I sit down, and I ask the question, because you and I looked at each other, and you said, what makes you happy, right? And if so many people want to help each other, that's fantastic, but you got to take care of yourself first. So take care of your mind, your body, and we talked about that earlier, and your spirit. Why are you doing it? And if you can take care of those first, you can help so many other people. And I'm not at 8 languages yet, but my español, un poco, ¿sí?
Yeah.
Yeah, ¿entiende? ¿Sí? Bueno. The best investment, and you talked about it earlier, which we all agree on, is find a role model. How many people have coaches here? See? And this was a weird thing, because you just asked me on the entrepreneurial world, which was kind of weird to me. I don't know if Canada's any different, but you asked me about my personal coaching program. And when I said, you said for entrepreneurs that you're training at universities, because you have quite a few universities you're training across, what's your male-female ratio, right?
30-40%, yeah.
Yeah, females. Mine, I don't know, I don't even market to females, but mine's 80-90% female, right? And I don't know if Canada is more aggressive that way, where they got personal one-on-one coaches or different atmosphere, but it's never a bad thing, as you said, to have a mentor. Is that correct? And we think it's the best investments in you. Thank you very much.
Gracias. Thank you, Bob.
How,
Rebecca. What do you think? What do you think about quotas? What do you think about women and female leadership?
Maybe I'll be a little controversial here, but I don't believe in quotas, and this is very different from the way a lot of the Scandinavian countries have built their policies. And I'll tell you, I arrived to this conclusion after market testing. I was about to found an investment fund to support something around women. I didn't know what. So I started off telling people I'm going to invest in female entrepreneurs because of all of the advantages that Henrik had mentioned. So I talked to a lot of women who are starting companies, and the best ones that I wanted to invest in told me, I don't want to be invested by a fund that specializes on female entrepreneurs. I want to be invested by the top VCs or investment funds, period. So I don't want to have the stigma or the perception that I got money because I was a woman. And I went to MIT. At MIT, still 15, 20 years ago, people used to ask women, like, did you get in because you're a woman? Because there's a quota, and you probably don't have as high scores as the men who got in, so you got special treatment. And that's a really horrible stigma to have. So what I did instead was to create a fund that supports companies that are targeting a female consumer. Because if you want to create a company that sells to women, you better have women in your team. But I'm investing in the market opportunity and in the best team for that, and not just because you have breasts, right? Really, the quality of your perspective in understanding the target audience is what matters. And if you're selling to women, being a woman is an advantage. So I personally prefer that the market speaks for itself, and that determines the quality and the quantity of deals that I see. And frankly, after we launched the fund, I see probably 60-70% of all the deal flow, all the startups and companies that I see are led by women. And it's not because I imposed a quota, but because they're selling to women. That's what they need to do a good job.
Thanks, Rebecca.
I have a perspective which is, yeah, she deserves it.
Go on, Sean.
I have a perspective on this. It's great in a capitalist economy, like I said, because people are, free entrepreneurship is encouraged, no matter in what form. But all nations are not built like that. And quotas are basically required for people to enter into something. Once that entry barrier is removed, then the woman has to compete as an equal. There is no doubt about it. There is no place at work in terms of lack of competencies or skills, because it has a direct impact on the economics of a business. So obviously that is not tolerable. But if the woman is made space of, one of the reasons for India, in India, we have a new law passed whereby in the political system there has to be a 50% representation at the time of election. So at the start of an election, so in your electorate, you have to have 50% female candidates. Then they compete as equals. So then the best one wins, and that's fine. But earlier on, they were not even allowed to get into the system, you see? So once you have a woman as a political leader, you have her thinking about the female side, you have her protecting the feminine laws and all of that, and you get a more open society that way. So that is where it helps you. Participation gets you something. So to just use a quota as a door opener rather than as a competing advantage, right? Because we need to equalize this ratio in a lot of countries. It's not equal. So that's my perspective on it.
You were even explaining that in India, publicly traded companies
Yes.
the corporate world require at least one female board member, right?
Yes, it's now a law that if you're a publicly traded company in India, you have to have at least one female board member. It's a start, right? Once this woman gets in, now here is where women can help women. And I think we don't do enough of that. Once there is a woman in a space, she protects her space. She won't let another woman in. Why do we do that? Men don't do that to each other. We shouldn't be doing that. We should be supporting other women. We should be helping other women because we need that, right? So that's one other aspect, yes.
Gracias. So then, Henrik, why would women empowerment be central for society and for creating a better culture?
Well, to my point previously, that we've seen that companies simply succeed better. They build better products, they have a better understanding of their customer segment, and they tend to excel when they have women influence in the team somehow. Ideally in the founding team, but if not in the founding team, then at least some of the early employees have to be women ideally. To Rebecca's point that you have worldwide, 70% of all purchasing decisions are influenced, if not made, by women. So as a business owner, that makes it very logical to realize that, well, as an entrepreneur, one of the most important things is to understand your customer, right? Understand the user who's going to be using that product. Can I understand how a product will be perceived by the user if the user is majority of women? No, I won't, right? I won't have those insights. I will simply not understand the context of how they're using the product, what influences the purchasing decision, how are they going to share those products with their friends. I don't get that, and I realized that very quickly. So it's extremely important as a business owner to get women on the team. So I think for society, in order to see any kind of technological advancements and see businesses thrive, it's simply it's a no-brainer. We need to have more women influence in businesses in general. So yeah, but around the quota issue, I'm also not a big fan of quotas. I completely agree with Sharma's point that initially it can be a necessary thing to put in place, and several different Scandinavian governments have done that same thing, that initially there was a quota of minimum 40% in the parliament had to be women. Now they've taken that law away because it's no longer necessary. But it can be, as a business owner, maybe a good thing to do, just to set up some of those rules to remind yourself and to force yourself to look harder for those candidates, at least in that transition period, until it's become fully recognized by the board, by the investors, by anyone else, that of course it adds value to the business. Not for the sake of just adding women, but for the sake of the business.
Good. Bob, what are your thoughts? You're an expert in personal achievement, setting goals. Do women need quotas?
I'm not sure she would know more about it. It was interesting, we talked about, and I study in Eastern philosophy about quota, and she brought up another point that there's never one silver bullet. There's a few things that we talked about that influence other people, and you talked about one person getting in there and kind of hovering the nest, as you would say, right? And if I can get one point made out of this, when I sit down and do goal setting, and this is an interesting observation, my only mine, I sit down and I go through their goals with them. And you're going to start giggling because you know this. I said, who else do you share your goals with? And 9 out of 10 times, a female sitting across from me will say, no, you already know the answer to it, right? I don't share them with anybody. I'm doing them by myself.
Sad.
Yes. And the best thing, what you've done here and what she's done is created teams. And we all start collaboration, and we talked about it before, is working as a group together. So when I sit down and I'm going to sit down and do their goals, my first question I ask is I say, who's on your team to help you get this goal done? And that gets overlooked so many times. And if I can throw another little nugget out there for everybody, and you and I are going to be in agreement, is that when you set your goals, put a whole team around that so you can accomplish that.
Enablers.
Don't go solo, right? It's like having sex. It's always better having a partner. You know what I mean? It's always recommend that you have a whole group around you when you're doing it, and get a team. It's so crucial, and it's a step that so many people miss, is not getting a team together.
Right.
Right. Thank you, Bob. What do you think, Rebecca? Should this be a strategy that we should all put together to empower women to generate better collaboration?
are we still talking about the quotas? I appreciate and respect all the points made by the panel, but I will still maintain that I think the starting point is education. I would love to see education early on, and we're talking about girls who are 2, 3, 4 years old. At that level, start with making them feel more confident, start with them making their voices be heard, and study fields in STEM, science and engineering and technology. I think that's going to create the deal flow or the pipeline for us to see more supply of women who are qualified and passionate to get into some of these fields. In some scenarios, I do agree that there may be the need to impose some guidelines, but even though my business had 50% or more women at all times, I would probably have not appreciated having that imposed to me, but rather having the opportunity to do that because I recognize the benefit of it. And that is a very clear and important distinction, that people are doing it for the right reasons and not because it's imposed or in a contrived way.
Very good. We might have some time for some questions. There are some people wanting to ask some questions. If you could get some assistance or probably some papers
With a mic.
or
Yeah.
a mic might be easier. And
Okay.
bien.
Got a new guy on the track team.
I think you really pointed on the really fear a woman has towards another woman. What would you give as a clue for that jealousy to be over and to try to change the mind and to be more in a team to help one woman to another?
I think everything begins with fear. It's a fear of, you see, a woman struggles so hard to get there that once she's there, she's protecting herself. So it comes from fear. We need to remove this fear of losing that place. We need to know that, this fear is not going to come in our way. And I agree with Rebecca 100% in that we start generation by generation. There is no point in creating a revolution around the subject, okay? Because revolutions are pushy, they're hard, they hurt, and they die. Their energy is very, very weak. But if we look at social reform, we do it generation by generation. So if one generation just decides that we are going to raise enabled women, we are going to enable women to be powerful and to be empowered. See, ultimately, nobody empowers you. You empower yourself. The power is within you. These are just tools that you use. So you create an enabling environment in which a person feels empowered. And then you take it from there and have these collaborative ideas about doing things together, because women work brilliantly together when they have to do things, say organize a party or a social circle, because they have no fear around that. And the other big thing is that we have to stop criticizing and judging other women as women. We do a lot of damage to ourselves by hurting our self-image by saying, oh, she is not pretty, I am pretty, she is not bright, she is this, she is that. Why are we doing this? We don't do this to ourselves. Yet another enabler is a good husband, a good life partner. I think there is a lot of wisdom. In Mexico, I do know that you have a lot of teenage pregnancies as a problem, single mothers. Now, one of the things that we need to teach our girl child is to choose her life partner carefully and to make the decision of going into motherhood with a lot of thought, because it's going to rob her of every freedom if she doesn't, right? So it is important to educate our girl child to feel that she is sufficient unto herself. She doesn't need a man to finish completing her soul power. And beyond that, then she can always add a man as an additional force, but not as the living force. This is what I think.
Thank you, Kshama.
And that's a choice.
I know we are really running out of time. I am very, very sorry with the audience. You can reach their emails and contact information. Please feel free to do this.
Please.
We really have no more time for any questions. I would just ask for a final statement, one final recommendation you would give the audience on these subjects we've opened today. Henrik?
I feel like we come across a lot of different things, but yeah, I guess my closing statement would also be around education and providing more experiential entrepreneurship education or experiential education in general. So as in a very early stage, people get to work together also with the opposite gender. I go to a lot of private high schools in the US occasionally where they have all boys high school and then you have an all girls school. That is very much against my general belief. I think as early as possible, guys, boys and girls need to start working together so they see the power of having complementary skill sets in the team. They see that there is a benefit of having different perspectives and that, you know, boys and girls think differently, and by combining those, different types of thinking into one team, you can reach a quality level and a level of innovation that you can't reach just by having an all girl or an all boys team. So experiential education and working together will be a big important aspect.
Rebecca, one recommendation.
I think there's a need for a fundamental change in the way we use wording around this topic. So the discourse around women and empowerment is usually centered around barriers, things we can't do, lack of rights, and it creates this negative sense of, it's bad to be a woman, whereas a lot of times I feel like there's so many advantages to being a woman in a field like technology or Silicon Valley. I go into a room in a networking event and there are 90% men and only 10% women. That's helpful because I stand out. It's really hard to stand out when you look like everybody else with the same dream. When I look for press, press right now is really eager to cover stories of women. So sometimes I could actually get access to having features that perhaps men at the same stage of my company couldn't. And many examples like this. And I think going back to the question from the audience, people, for example, who are in elite groups, like let's say you graduated from an MBA at Harvard, they don't see being a minority as a bad thing. They see the elite status to be a really great advantage to help each other and to empower that group and community by being very collaborative. And I think we have to change the discourse to also speak to the advantages and the power of women getting together, because we're a few in many fields, but that's actually, in some cases, a very good tool for us to make more impact.
Gracias, muchas gracias, Rebecca. Bob, do the closing.
We maybe agree on too much stuff, right? Without a doubt. And we use the same word in the back too. We said, you just mentioned it, but the best thing you can do, and we talked about it, is invest in yourself. How many people believe that, number one, your priority should be in yourself? All agree? 2 hands. And if you could change that in your priority list, take care of your mind, your body, and your spirit. What we just talked about earlier, just in the back. Whether you eat healthy foods is a choice. Whether you take care of your mind is a choice. Whether you take people around you, they're all choices. Life is all about choices. Choosing the right husband is a choice. Choose well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Shama. Thank you very much, Bob, Henrik, Rebecca. It's been a great, great pleasure. And thank you all for being here. Gracias. Hasta luego.
Gracias.